Hello. So I was in a job interview the other day, and they asked me a really, really good question, and I wanted to share the answer to that question with you, because I think it's actually really important. And I think it's often something that we in English, the humanities, the arts don't necessarily talk enough about, especially we don't necessarily talk enough about it publicly. So the question that I was asked is, let's say a student came to me in this case, and said, I really want to be an English major or a classics major or a theater major, an art major, humanities major, whatever it is, but my parents don't think I should. What would you tell that student? I think that's a fantastic question. I think that's actually a question that should be more common in academic job interviews. I feel like I've gotten that question a couple of times, but often not, but is really, really important to think about why what we as humanities and arts people do matters. So what I had said in the interview, and what I'm going to tell you now, is I basically have two answers to this. One is a sort of pragmatic answer that likely deals with the anxieties of parents, high school guidance counselors, even students themselves about going into the humanities or the arts, and the other is the idealist's answer. So the pragmatic answer is English majors, humanities majors, arts majors get jobs. The data supports that assertion. According to the people who track these kinds of things, that is, track what majors place people in jobs, what sort of salaries those people make at the beginning of their career, what sort of salaries those people make by mid-career. According to that data, English majors are very employable. They often don't, humanities majors across the board, arts majors across the board, often don't start out at as high a salary as STEM majors may, but by mid-career, statistically, you're likely to make a very healthy salary. So that's the sort of pragmatic end of it. Because the humanities and the arts are very, very good at teaching soft skills, which employers consistently want, so things like communication, ability to write clearly, ability to think creatively, ability to understand written instructions, empathy, willingness to see problems from multiple perspectives. The arts and humanities are very, very good at developing these kinds of skills, even if we don't in the classroom necessarily talk about it in those ways. When we read a text critically and say, okay, how can we look at this from different angles to understand it in different ways? That's developing creative thinking, critical thinking, close reading skills. These are soft skills. And if you go to these sort of business forums, business magazines, Forbes, Business Weekly, whatever it is, one of the things employers consistently say, that like top CEOs of places consistently say, is that they want people who can be collegial, they want people who can be creative, they want people who can look at problems critically and find dynamic solutions. And employers know that humanities majors and arts majors are trained to do that in a way that sometimes the STEM disciplines don't train people as well for. So humanities majors, arts majors, English majors definitely do get hired, and they make decent salaries, statistically, at least by mid-career. So in terms of the anxiety that your parents or whoever it is are likely to have, that's the thing that you can tell them. And there's a lot of data about this available online. Because part of the thing is people often think they know which majors are going to lead to profitable employment, and that's not necessarily always right. The STEM majors, yes, they tend to lead to profitable employment if you are actually good at STEM. And some people aren't. Often the people who are drawn to English, who are drawn to the humanities, theater, the arts, whatever it is, are not necessarily STEM oriented. I'm definitely not. I mean, I'm terrible at basic math. Although in fairness, Einstein was apparently bad at basic math too. So I don't know. Maybe I'm actually better at science than I think. But nonetheless, I don't have a particular aptitude for science. My sister does. My dad did. But my mom and I both have aptitudes for reading, for critical interpretation, things like this. So that's part of the thing, is people think that they know which majors are going to be profitable and which aren't, and they think that English and humanities majors end up unemployed or employed as baristas, right? That's the stereotype. You work at Starbucks or whatever it is. The data shows that that's simply not true. You want to know, actually, this data was from a few years ago that I last sort of saw this, but you want to know the major that is among the least employed? Business majors. Even though a lot of people think that business majors would be very employable, they think that business would be a good major to pursue, the data actually shows that business majors are not necessarily, like they have among the lowest placement rates for degree programs. Another one that's been having a lot of trouble in the past, I don't know, decade or so is actually law. There was an overproduction of lawyers in the 80s and 90s. And so there was a period, especially in the early 2000s, where people would get law degrees and end up working as unpaid paralegals because those were the only positions available. And I actually think, I've thought this for a little while, I think we're on the way to overproducing engineering majors. I think in the next decade or so, we're likely to have a lot of people with engineering degrees and not that many people, not that many jobs for engineers. I'm getting a little bit off track here, but this is my point ultimately. For that anxiety about, are you going to university? Are we racking up a bunch of student debt? And then you're not going to be able to get a job. If you are in the humanities or the arts, statistically, the answer is yes, you will be able to get a job, and you will, at least by mid-career, make decent pay. So that's the pragmatic side of things, the practical side of things. The other thing, the idealist side of me, wants to say, and I would want to lead with this, but I recognize that it's rhetorically the weaker position for people who have that pragmatic concern about employment. But my idealist position is kind of the Dead Poets Society position, right? That art, culture, scholarship, understanding the beautiful creations of world cultures, this is what makes life worth living, right? There's a reason that we still read today the Epic of Gilgamesh, thousands and thousands of years after it was first composed, but we don't read Sumerian tax documents and trade accounts. Those things exist. We have lots of them. There's tons and tons of tablets out there from these ancient cities of Ur and Nineveh, these other places in the ancient Near East where civilization was first created. Other than some specialists in the area, nobody reads them. They just aren't culturally important in the way that these great poems are, these great works of art, great, even cave paintings, prehistoric cave paintings, we still look at. We still say, wow, look at how amazing humanity is, how creative and brilliant and incredible we are. And I think that's incredibly important. Obviously, I'm not saying like everyone should be an arts and humanities major and everyone should pursue the arts. But if it's something that you are inclined to do, I think there is an innate value to pursuing the arts because they are important. They are what make us human. Without art, without philosophy, even without religion, as much as many people are critical of religion and theology, without these things, what are we? The other element that I had answered in this particular interview, this was an area that has a very strong storytelling and folk song tradition, and so I pointed to that particular tradition in this context, and I think that's true of a lot of areas actually. Like this happened to be. I'm not going to be more specific than this, but this happened to be in Appalachia. And Appalachia has very strong folk traditions, very strong storytelling, very strong musical traditions, and music that is typically ballad style, that tells stories. And so one argument that I would make to a student from Appalachia who's approaching me and asking, why should I be an English major or an arts major, is because that's what your culture does. That is what people from your area do. And I think this is often the case. It's just a question of what are the dominant artistic traditions in that area. Is this an area where rap is predominant? Rap is a storytelling genre as well. Is this an area where folk music is predominant? Is this an area where whatever style it is, country or something like this, what does this area do? Because everybody tells stories, everybody makes art, everybody sings songs, things like this. And so if you can connect to that, it can help you understand where you come from in a more sophisticated, more engaged way. And I think that's valuable as well. So those are my sort of answers to the question, why should I become an English, humanities, or arts major?